What happens when a warrior's final promise forces two very different lives to collide in the middle of a brutal Montana winter? The answer could change everything they thought they knew about survival, loyalty, and trust. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. Montana Territory, 1868. The harsh winter winds swept across the vast plains of Blackfeet territory, carrying with them the promise of difficult months ahead. Running Wolf, a respected warrior of the Blackfeet tribe, stood at the entrance of his lodge, his eyes scanning the horizon. His friend, Swift Arrow, had not returned from a hunting expedition 3 days ago, and the community feared the worst. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the snow-covered ground, a lone figure appeared in the distance. Running Wolf narrowed his eyes, recognizing the silhouette of Swift Arrow's horse. But something was wrong. The rider was slumped forward, barely holding on. "Help!" Running Wolf called out to the others. "Swift Arrow returns wounded." Several warriors rushed to meet the approaching horse. When they reached Swift Arrow, they found him pierced by 2 arrows, his life's blood frozen on his clothing. He had managed to return to his people, but it was clear he would not survive the night. In the medicine lodge, as the tribal healer tended to Swift Arrow's wounds, the dying warrior grasped Running Wolf's arm with surprising strength. "Brother," Swift Arrow whispered, his breath labored, "I will join our ancestors soon. My wife, Morning Star, and my children will be alone. My son is only 7 summers old and has not yet learned to hunt. My daughter is but a newborn, still needing her mother's milk." Running Wolf nodded solemnly. "I will watch over them, my brother." Swift Arrow's grip tightened. "The white settlers at Fort Benton," he coughed, blood speckling his lips. "There is a widow there, a woman called Sarah Miller. She lost her husband to the fever last summer. She has no children but knows the ways of healing and caring for infants. The fort's doctor speaks highly of her skills." Running Wolf frowned, confused by his friend's words. "What are you asking of me, brother? Morning Star cannot hunt and care for a newborn alone. My son needs to learn the ways of our people, to become a warrior and provider. The widow Miller, she could help Morning Star with the baby while my wife teaches our son to survive. The white woman needs protection and provision through the winter. It would benefit both." The request was unusual. Bringing a white woman to their camp was not something done lightly. The relationship between the Blackfeet and the settlers remained tense, despite recent treaties. "The white woman showed kindness when I traded at the fort," Swift Arrow continued. "She is not like others who look at us with fear or hatred. She knows healing plants and helped my wife when we visited with stomach sickness. She has lost much, as Morning Star will soon lose me." As the night deepened, Swift Arrow's breathing grew more labored. The tribal elders gathered, listening to his final wishes. By morning, Swift Arrow had passed into the spirit world, leaving Running Wolf with a solemn promise to fulfill. 3 days later, after the burial ceremonies were complete, Running Wolf prepared for the journey to Fort Benton. Morning Star, grief etched deeply in her face, approached him as he readied his horse. "My husband believed this was best for our children," she said, her voice steady despite her pain. "I trust his wisdom, but the white woman may not come willingly." Running Wolf nodded. "I will speak truthfully to her. If she refuses, I will return alone." Little Bear, Swift Arrow's son, watched with solemn eyes as Running Wolf mounted his horse. The boy's face bore the stoic expression of one trying desperately not to show weakness, though he was only 7 years old. "Will you bring back someone to help my mother?" the boy asked, his voice small against the winter wind. Running Wolf looked down at the child who would one day need to become the provider for his family. "I will try, Little Bear. Your father was wise to think of your future. You must be strong now for your mother and sister." As Running Wolf rode away from the camp, the weight of his promise to his dying friend pressed heavily upon him. The journey to Fort Benton would take 2 days in good weather, longer in the snow. He wondered how he would convince a white widow to return with him to a Blackfeet camp, especially with tensions between their peoples always simmering beneath the surface. What lay ahead was uncertain, but Running Wolf was determined to honor his friend's last request, no matter the challenges that awaited him at the white settlement. Fort Benton stood as a stark contrast to the natural landscape, its wooden walls and buildings imposing themselves upon the Montana wilderness. Running Wolf approached cautiously, aware of the suspicious glances cast his way by the sentries. Though there was peace between the Blackfeet and the white settlers, trust remained fragile. He had traded at this outpost before and knew enough English to communicate his intentions. The guards at the gate recognized him as a peaceful visitor and allowed him entry, though their hands remained close to their weapons. "I seek Sarah Miller," Running Wolf stated to the trading post owner, a gruff man named Daniels, who had dealt fairly with the Blackfeet in the past. Daniels eyed him curiously. "The widow Miller? What business does a Blackfoot warrior have with her?" Running Wolf maintained his dignified bearing. "Swift Arrow, my brother in spirit, has died. His final wish concerns her." The mention of Swift Arrow's death caused Daniel's expression to soften slightly. "Sorry to hear that. He was a fair trader." After a moment's consideration, he pointed toward a small cabin at the edge of the settlement. "That's her place. She works with Doc Harrison sometimes, helping with the sick." As Running Wolf approached the modest cabin, he observed smoke rising from the chimney. A small garden, now dormant under winter's grip, suggested the woman was self-sufficient to some degree. He knocked on the door, steeling himself for the conversation ahead. The door opened to reveal a woman in her late 20s, her brown hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her face showed the weathered quality of those who had endured frontier hardships, but her eyes remained clear and alert. When she saw Running Wolf, surprise registered on her face, but not fear. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady. "I am Running Wolf of the Blackfeet," he introduced himself. "You knew Swift Arrow and his family?" Recognition flashed across her features. "Yes. I helped his wife with a remedy when they visited last summer. How are they?" "Swift Arrow has joined the ancestors," Running Wolf said solemnly. "He was attacked by enemies and died from his wounds 3 days ago." Sarah's hand went to her mouth. "I'm very sorry to hear that. Please, come in from the cold." The invitation surprised him. Few white settlers would welcome a Blackfoot warrior into their homes so readily. Inside, the cabin was modest but organized, with dried herbs hanging from the ceiling and shelves lined with jars of medicines and preserves. "What brings you here regarding Swift Arrow?" she asked once they were seated. Running Wolf chose his words carefully. Swift Arrow left behind a wife, a 7-year-old son, and a newborn daughter. His dying wish was unusual. "He asked that I bring you to our camp." Sarah's eyebrows rose in astonishment. "Bring me to your camp? Why would he ask such a thing?" His wife, Morning Star, must teach their son to hunt and survive, but she also has a nursing infant. Swift Arrow believed you could help with the baby while Morning Star trains the boy. He said you know medicine ways and have experience with infants. Sarah sat in stunned silence for a moment. "I worked as a midwife in St. Louis before coming west with my husband," she finally said. "And yes, I've helped deliver and care for babies here at the fort. But to leave and go to a Blackfeet camp, I don't know what to say." "Swift Arrow also spoke of your situation?" Running Wolf continued. "He said you are alone since your husband died of fever. Winter is harsh on the plains for those without family." Sarah's expression tightened. "I manage well enough." "Perhaps. But in our camp you would have protection and food through the winter. You would help Morning Star, and she would ensure you survive until spring." The widow stood and walked to her window, looking out at the fort. "The people here would think I've gone mad. A white woman voluntarily going to live with the Blackfeet? Some whites and some Blackfeet wish to live separately always," Running Wolf acknowledged. "But Swift Arrow believed in finding ways to help each other survive." Sarah turned back to him. "How long would I stay?" "Until spring, when the snow melts and travel becomes easier. By then the baby will be stronger, and Morning Star will have taught her son much of what he needs to know." The widow fell silent, contemplating the proposal. Running Wolf waited patiently, recognizing the magnitude of what he was asking. "I've lost nearly everything," she finally said. "My husband, my home back east, the life I thought I would have. All I have left is my knowledge and my willingness to help others." She looked directly at Running Wolf. "If I agree to this, I would need to bring my medicines and supplies, and I would need your word that I can return here when spring comes." "You have my word as a Blackfeet warrior," Running Wolf replied solemnly. "I will personally ensure your safe return when the time comes." Sarah nodded slowly. I'll need a day to prepare and to speak with Dr. Harrison. He relies on my help with patients. We will leave at dawn the day after tomorrow, Running Wolf agreed. I will camp outside the fort tonight and return tomorrow. As he prepared to leave, Sarah asked one final question. What is the baby's name? The one I'll be helping to care for? Running Wolf paused at the door. She is called Little Otter, for she was born near the water and makes sounds like the playful animal. A small smile touched Sarah's lips. Little Otter. I look forward to meeting her. As Running Wolf left the fort to make his camp for the night, he felt both relief and apprehension. The widow had agreed more readily than he expected, but bringing her back to the Blackfeet camp would undoubtedly raise questions among both peoples. Yet, he had promised his dying friend, and now he would see it through, whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey back to the Blackfeet camp was arduous. Snow had begun to fall again, creating a white veil across the landscape that made travel slow and difficult. Running Wolf led the way on his horse, while Sarah Miller followed on a sturdy mare she had purchased with the last of her savings. Strapped to her saddle were her most essential possessions: medicines, bandages, spare clothing, and a few treasured items from her former life. They had left Fort Benton at dawn, with a small crowd of curious onlookers watching their departure. Dr. Harrison had initially objected to Sarah's decision, but eventually relented when she explained her reasons. These people need me more than the fort does right now, she had told him, and I'll return in the spring. Now, as they navigated the snow-covered plains, Sarah found herself questioning her decision. The biting cold penetrated her layers of clothing, and the unfamiliar terrain seemed endless. How much farther? She called out to Running Wolf as the afternoon sun began its descent. We will not reach the camp today, he replied. There is a sheltered place ahead where we can make camp for the night. An hour later, they arrived at a small grove of trees that offered some protection from the wind. Running Wolf efficiently set about making a fire, while Sarah tended to the horses. You handle horses well, Running Wolf observed as she secured the animals. My father raised horses in Kentucky, she explained. Before I became a midwife, I spent most of my childhood in stables. As they sat by the fire eating dried meat and the cornbread Sarah had brought, Running Wolf studied the widow with curiosity. She was unlike any white woman he had encountered before, practical, self-sufficient, and seemingly unafraid of the wilderness or of him. Why did you agree to come? He finally asked. Most white women would not leave the safety of the fort. Sarah stared into the flames. When my husband died last summer, something changed in me. James came west with dreams of building a trading empire, but the fever took him within our first year here. I stayed because I had nowhere else to go, and because people needed my skills. She looked up at Running Wolf. I've delivered babies from white mothers, mixed blood mothers, and even helped a Crow woman who came to the fort seeking aid. A baby is a baby, no matter the color of its skin or the language its mother speaks. Running Wolf nodded thoughtfully. Swift Arrow chose wisely then. Tell me about Morning Star and her children, Sarah requested. What should I expect? Morning Star is strong like you, Running Wolf said. She does not show her grief openly, for she must be strong for her children. Little Bear, the son, is quiet but observant. He wants to be a warrior like his father. Little Otter, the baby, is healthy but demanding. She cries for milk often. And how will the rest of your people receive me? Will they accept my presence? Running Wolf's expression grew serious. Some will welcome the help you bring. Others will be suspicious. Our people have suffered much at the hands of white settlers. But you come at my invitation, as Swift Arrow wished. You will be under my protection. Sarah nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. I won't pretend to know the depth of your people's suffering, but I promise to respect your ways and to help however I can while I'm there. That night, as Sarah lay wrapped in her blankets near the fire, she found herself thinking of the path that had led her here, from a comfortable home in Kentucky to a frontier fort, and now to a Blackfeet camp. Her life had taken turns she could never have imagined. Yet somehow this unexpected journey felt right, as though she was finally fulfilling the purpose that had eluded her since James's death. The next day dawned clear but cold. They broke camp early and continued their journey across the snow-covered plains. By midday, Running Wolf pointed to a distant rise. Our camp lies just beyond those hills. We will arrive before sunset. As they crested the final hill, Sarah caught her first glimpse of the Blackfeet camp spread out in a sheltered valley below. Conical lodges made of hides stood in a circular arrangement, with smoke rising from their tops. People moved about between the structures, and children played despite the cold. "It's larger than I expected," Sarah commented. "This is only one band of our people," Running Wolf explained. "Many bands travel separately in winter to find game." As they rode into the camp, their arrival caused a stir. People emerged from their lodges to watch, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright suspicion. Children pointed and whispered. Sarah felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon her but sat straight in her saddle, meeting their gazes calmly. They dismounted near a lodge slightly larger than the others. An older man emerged, his face deeply lined with age and experience. Running Wolf spoke to him in their native tongue, explaining Sarah's presence. The elder listened, then nodded slowly before addressing the gathering crowd in Blackfeet. "He is telling them of Swift Arrow's wish," Running Wolf translated for Sarah. "He says you are here to help Morning Star with the baby so she can teach Little Bear the ways of our people." A woman stepped forward from the crowd, a baby wrapped securely against her chest. Though her face showed signs of recent grief, she carried herself with dignity. Beside her stood a solemn-faced boy who stared at Sarah with undisguised curiosity. "Morning Star," Running Wolf said softly to Sarah, "and Little Bear." Sarah dismounted and approached the widow and her children. Following Running Wolf's earlier advice, she did not immediately extend her hand, but instead gave a respectful nod. "I am Sarah Miller," she said. "Swift Arrow spoke of you to me last summer. I am sorry for your loss and honored to help you and your children," Running Wolf translated, and Morning Star listened intently. After a moment she responded, her voice steady despite the grief that shadowed her eyes. "She says you are welcome to her lodge," Running Wolf translated. "She asks if you truly know how to care for babies, and if you can help Little Otter grow strong." Sarah nodded confidently. "Yes, I have helped many mothers and babies. I will do everything I can for Little Otter." When Running Wolf translated, Morning Star's expression softened slightly. She shifted the bundle in her arms, revealing the face of a sleeping infant no more than 2 months old. "Little Otter," Morning Star said, one of the few English words she knew. Sarah smiled gently at the baby. "She's beautiful." Little Bear, who had been watching the exchange carefully, suddenly spoke up. Running Wolf translated, "He asks if you know how to make the medicine that helped his mother's stomach sickness last summer. He remembers you gave her something that tasted bitter but made her well." Sarah knelt to the boy's level. "Yes, I remember. That was willow bark tea. I have brought more with me, and I can show you and your mother how to find it when spring comes." When Running Wolf translated, the boy's serious expression gave way to a tentative smile. As the crowd began to disperse, Morning Star gestured for Sarah to follow her to her lodge. Inside, the dwelling was warm from a central fire, with sleeping robes arranged around the perimeter and various belongings neatly stored. Through Running Wolf's translation, Morning Star explained the arrangement. Sarah would help with Little Otter, especially during the mornings when Morning Star would take Little Bear to learn hunting and tracking skills. In return, Sarah would have shelter, food, and protection through the winter months. As night descended on the camp, Sarah sat beside the fire in Morning Star's lodge, watching as the Blackfeet woman nursed her infant daughter. Outside, the wind howled across the plains, but inside, a fragile understanding had begun to form between two women from different worlds, united by loss and the universal language of motherhood. "Tomorrow," Morning Star said through Running Wolf's translation, "we begin." Winter deepened its hold on the Montana plains as January gave way to February. Within the Blackfeet camp, life had settled into a rhythm for Sarah Miller. Each morning, after Morning Star nursed Little Otter, she would hand the infant to Sarah before taking Little Bear out to learn the skills he would need to become a provider for his family. The boy was proving to be a quick learner, already able to identify animal tracks in the snow and set simple snares for rabbits. Sarah spent her days caring for Little Otter, preparing herbal remedies, and learning the basics of the Blackfeet language from the elder women who had gradually warmed to her presence. Her medical knowledge had earned her respect in the camp, especially after she successfully treated several children for winter coughs and helped set a warrior's broken arm. On this particular morning, as Sarah cradled little Otter while preparing a poultice for one of the elders, Running Wolf entered Morning Star's lodge. "The women say you have been learning our words," he remarked, looking impressed. Sarah nodded. "Just simple things. Water, baby, medicine. Morning Star has been patient with my poor pronunciation." Running Wolf smiled slightly. "You learn quickly for a white woman. Is that a compliment or an observation?" Sarah asked with a raised eyebrow. "Both," he replied. After a moment, he continued, "The council wishes to speak with you tonight. They are curious about your medicines and your life before coming here." Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness. "Have I done something wrong?" "No," Running Wolf assured her. "They see how you care for little Otter and how you have helped others with your knowledge. They wish to understand you better." That evening, Sarah sat before the Council of Elders in the central lodge, little Otter sleeping peacefully in a cradleboard nearby. Through Running Wolf's translation, the elders asked about her training as a midwife, her journey west, and the medicines she prepared. "Your people and mine have different ways of healing," Sarah explained, "but we both use plants that the Creator has provided. There is wisdom in both approaches." The oldest of the elders, a man named Many Horses, nodded thoughtfully. "The white doctor at the fort has knives and bitter waters that sometimes heal and sometimes kill. Your ways seem gentler." "Doctors have their place," Sarah replied. "Some sicknesses and injuries need their tools, but many ailments can be treated with plants and proper care." As the council concluded, Many Horses made a declaration that Running Wolf translated with evident surprise. "He says that when spring comes and you return to the fort, they would like you to teach some of our women your healing methods, if you are willing to visit again." Sarah felt a surge of emotion. "I would be honored," she replied sincerely. The following weeks brought heavier snow and bitter cold. Game became scarcer, and the hunters, including Running Wolf, had to venture farther from camp. During one such hunting expedition, a blizzard descended without warning, forcing the hunters to seek emergency shelter in a cave. The camp waited anxiously for 2 days, with no sign of the hunting party. Morning Star maintained her composure, but Sarah could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear she had likely felt when Swift Arrow had not returned. On the third morning, Little Bear approached Sarah as she ground dried herbs with a stone mortar. "Will Running Wolf come back?" he asked in halting English, having picked up words from Sarah over the weeks. Sarah set aside her work and considered the boy's question carefully. "Running Wolf is strong and wise, like your father was. He knows how to survive in the snow." Little Bear nodded solemnly. "I will be strong too, for my mother and little Otter." "You already are strong," Sarah told him, feeling a surge of affection for the boy who had gradually accepted her presence in his life. "Your mother is proud of how quickly you're learning." Just before midday, a shout went up from the edge of the camp. The hunting party had returned, laden with elk meat that would sustain the community for weeks. Running Wolf, frostbitten but otherwise unharmed, nodded respectfully to Sarah as he passed Morning Star's lodge. Later that evening, as Sarah sat by the fire cradling a sleeping little Otter, Running Wolf joined her. "The boy speaks more English now," he observed. "And I speak more Blackfeet," Sarah replied with a smile, "though I'm sure my accent is terrible." Running Wolf studied her for a moment. "You have changed since you came here." "How so?" "There is more peace in your eyes. When I first met you at the fort, you were like a bird in a too small cage." Sarah considered his words. "Perhaps you're right. After James died, I felt trapped. By grief, by circumstances, by the walls of the fort itself. Here, despite the hardships, I've found purpose again." Running Wolf nodded understanding. "Morning Star says the same. Your presence has allowed her to honor Swift Arrow's wish for their son. Little Bear will be able to provide for his family when he becomes a man." As February turned to March, the first hints of spring began to appear. The snow started to melt during the day, though it still froze hard at night. Birds returned to the plains, and green shoots emerged where the ground was exposed. One morning, as Sarah helped Morning Star prepare breakfast, the Blackfeet woman spoke directly to her in careful English. "You teach me, I teach you." "Good." Surprised and touched, Sarah responded in the Blackfeet words she had learned. "Yes, Good friends. Morningstar smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed her face. When snow goes, you go back to fort? Sarah nodded, feeling an unexpected pang at the thought. Yes, as we agreed, but I will visit, as the council requested. Morningstar considered this, then said firmly, Little Otter need you. Little Bear need you. I need you. Before Sarah could respond, Running Wolf entered the lodge. The ice on the river is breaking, he announced. In 2 weeks, the path to the fort will be clear enough for travel. Sarah nodded acknowledgement, but her mind was suddenly filled with conflicting thoughts. Her promise to return to Fort Benton had been sincere when she made it, but now, the prospect filled her with a strange reluctance. That night, unable to sleep, Sarah stepped outside the lodge. The sky was clear, filled with more stars than she had ever seen at the fort, where the lamps and fires dimmed the night sky. She heard footsteps and turned to see Running Wolf approaching. You cannot sleep? He asked. I'm thinking about the future, she admitted. About returning to the fort. Running Wolf was silent for a moment. You do not wish to return? I don't know, Sarah said honestly. At the fort I help where I can, but my life feels incomplete. Here I found something I didn't expect. What have you found? Sarah gestured toward Morningstar's lodge. Family, purpose. Little Otter and Little Bear have become dear to me. Morningstar has become a friend despite our different languages and ways. Running Wolf nodded thoughtfully. The council would welcome you to stay longer if that is your wish. Your medicines have helped many. And what about you? Sarah asked, surprising herself with her boldness. What do you think I should do? Running Wolf looked at her directly, his expression serious. I think you should follow what your heart tells you is right. Swift Arrow believed our peoples could help each other survive. Perhaps your staying would honor his vision. As dawn broke 2 weeks later, Sarah stood outside Morningstar's lodge, her few possessions packed on her mare. The entire camp had gathered to bid her farewell, with many bringing small gifts, a beaded pouch, a parfleche container of dried berries, a small carved wooden bird. Morningstar approached with Little Otter in her arms and Little Bear at her side. The boy, who had grown noticeably more confident over the winter months, held out a small object wrapped in soft hide. For you, he said in English, to remember us. Sarah unwrapped it to find a small stone arrowhead attached to a leather cord, a necklace. I made it, Little Bear said proudly. Running Wolf helped. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she placed it around her neck. I will always treasure it. Morningstar handed Little Otter to Sarah for one last cuddle. The baby, now nearly 6 months old, gurgled happily and reached for Sarah's face. She knows you, Morningstar said in her improving English. You come back soon. Sooner than you might think, Sarah replied with a smile. She handed the baby back, and then surprised Morningstar by embracing her. After a moment's hesitation, the Blackfeet woman returned the embrace. Running Wolf approached, ready to escort Sarah back to Fort Benton as promised. It is time, he said gently. As they rode away from the camp, Sarah found herself looking back repeatedly until the lodges disappeared from view. They traveled in companionable silence for most of the morning, each lost in their own thoughts. When Fort Benton came into view in the distance, Running Wolf halted his horse. We will reach the fort by midday, he said. Sarah nodded, then took a deep breath. Running Wolf, I've made a decision. I'm going to gather my remaining possessions and speak with Dr. Harrison. Then if the offer still stands, I would like to return to the camp, at least until I can train some of your women in midwifery and medicine. Running Wolf's expression remained composed, but his eyes showed his surprise. You wish to return with me today? Yes, Sarah said with certainty. What began as Swift Arrow's final wish has become my own choice. There is more for me to learn from your people, and perhaps more I can teach as well. A rare smile spread across Running Wolf's face. Little Bear will be pleased. He has already planned to show you how he can now shoot a bow. And Little Otter will barely notice I was gone, Sarah added with a laugh. As they continued toward Fort Benton, Sarah felt a lightness in her heart that had been absent for too long. What had begun as an unusual arrangement born of necessity had transformed into something neither she nor Swift Arrow could have fully envisioned. A bridge between two worlds, built on respect, need, and the universal desire to see children thrive. By sundown, With her affairs at the fort settled and her remaining possessions packed, Sarah Miller rode beside Running Wolf back toward the Blackfeet camp, no longer as a temporary visitor, but as someone who had found an unexpected home on the Montana plains.